Hi, I'm Kelly from Kelly Jones Jewellery. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this pendant. I put a list in the description below of everything you'll need. Today we are using beads, just beads and weaves really. Also there's a link to my Etsy shop with all my written tutorials, digital downloads. That's www.kellyjonesjewellery.com, and there's also links to my Facebook and Instagram. So if you're on there, I'd love to see the finished work that you've made from my tutorials. Please mention me when you share your work online. To make this pendant, you'll need an 8mm bead and a 4mm bead. You need 0.8mm wire, that's 20 gauge, and I've cut 4 lengths at 13 inches, that's 33 centimetres, and weaving wire 0.315mm, that's 28 gauge, and you'll need about 450 centimetres. Tools, I've got my pliers, wire cutters, round nose pliers, nylon pliers. If you don't have nylon pliers, don't worry. I just use those for flattening the weaves and straightening the wires. I'm also using bail pliers today. If you don't have bail pliers, then you just need something the size of that, the smaller one on that one there. So you could use like a paintbrush or knitting needle, crochet hook, something that kind of size, just to bend the wires over for the bail. So take all 4 wires, and we're going to start about 5 inches from the beginning of those wires. That's just a little more than 12.5 centimetres. So take your weaving wire, and we'll start with 3 wraps around that bottom wire. So we'll go over the second wire, so we've gone around the bottom 2, and we'll do that twice. Come up between those 2 wires, and we'll go around the middle 2 wires. And we'll do that twice, so come up between the bottom 2, go around those middle 2 wires. Then come up between the middle 2 wires, and we'll go over the top, so we've gone around the top 2 wires, and we'll do that twice, so come back up between the middle wires and go over the top. Then come up between the bottom 2 wires, over the third, so we've gone around those 2 wires, and we'll do that twice. Under the bottom wire and over the second, so we're wrapping around the bottom 2 wires, and we'll do that twice. So we're going to repeat that weave a few more times. So come up between the bottom 2 wires and go over the third wire. Do that twice. So we've wrapped around the middle 2 wires. Come up between the middle 2, and we're going to go over the top. We'll do that twice. So we've wrapped around the top 2 wires twice. Come up between the bottom 2, over the third wire, so we're wrapping around the middle 2 wires. Do that twice. Under the bottom wire, over the second, so we're wrapping around the bottom 2 wires. We do that twice. So we need to repeat that another couple of times. So I've done 4 repeats of that weave. So now we're going to take this bottom wire, I'm going to bend it straight down. That's our bead wire. And we're going to take our weaving wire, we're going to bring it up between the top 2 wires. So now we're working across three wires. So we're going to wrap around the top wire 3 times. So take your time with your weaving, because it's best to take your time and get it nice and tidy rather than rush it. So I've gone 3 times around the top wire. Then I'll come up between the bottom 2, over the top. I've gone around the middle, I've gone around the top 2 wires, and I'll come under the bottom wire and straight over the top, so I've wrapped around all 3. Then I'll come up between those bottom 2 wires again and over the top, so I've wrapped around the top 2. And then I'll go between the top 2 wires and I'll go around that top wire again 3 times. So that's how I repeat. So just working across the 3 wires, repeat that weave. So I've done 8 repeats of that weave. Just going to flatten the weave down to keep it nice and tidy. And keep compressing your weave together as you work to keep it nice. If you've got a slightly different size bead, you may have to do a few more or less repeats. But we'll see how we get on with 8. So slide your bead onto that wire, and where the bead comes out the other side, just going to bend the wire straight down. And then very carefully we're going to scoop this weave around the top of the bead. I think to comfortably come round I'm going to have to do another couple of repeats on there. But you want these repeats to come all the way around your bead, so that you can then work across the 4 wires to repeat what we've got here on the other side. So I'm going to add some more repeats across the 3 wires. So I've added another 2 repeats of that weave across the 3 wires, and I'm happy that that reaches around now. I'm going to cut this tail end off from the beginning because it's getting in the way. And always remember to flatten down any sharp ends. So now we're going to work across 4 wires, and we're going to do the same weave as we did at the beginning. So exactly the same, working across all 4 wires, do this weave and do the 4 repeats that you did there, so you've got the same on both sides. So I've done the 4 repeats on that side across the 4 wires, and then finish off. To match this side, we're going to finish with 3 wraps around the bottom wire. That'll hold the weave and it matches the other side. So again, keep pushing your weaves together to keep them tidy. We're going to carefully bring the weaves in to meet. You still want to keep it as flat as you can. So you've got that. Now where they meet at the top, grab the wires and we're going to bend them to all go straight up. So now we're going to weave across all 8 wires. And our weaving wires in the middle at the minute. So I've come up between the 3rd and 4th wire. I'm going to wrap around the 4th wire. I've come up between the 2nd and 3rd. I'm going to wrap around the 3rd. Come up between the 1st and 2nd. And I'm going to wrap around the 2nd wire. And then come under the bottom wire. And wrap around the bottom wire. So now we're in position to start our 8 wire weave. So we go over the 2nd, so we've wrapped around the bottom 2 and we come up between those 2. Then we go over the 3rd, so we're wrapping around the next 2 and we come up between. Then we want to wrap around the next 2. Come up in between them. Whoops. It's a little bit tricky to see where you are. You're going to have to keep adjusting those wires as you go. So then we go around the next 2, so that's that one. And come up in between them. Go around the next 2. And up between those, go around the next 2, up between them, over the top, and then around that top wire. So we've gone around 2 and then come up in between them and gone around the next 2 all the way to the top. Coming back down, we're going to wrap around each wire individually. So we've gone around the top one and we want to go around that one. So come up underneath that wire and wrap around that wire, second from the top. You want to come up underneath the next wire, so we can wrap around that one, and we're wrapping around every wire individually all the way down. So it is a bit tricky to see what I'm doing, but we need to do a nice solid weave across all the wires now. So we need to keep repeating that weave. So on the way up, you go around 2 and come up in between, and you do that all the way up to the top. Then you go around the top wire. Then you carefully go around each wire all the way down. So you come up underneath it and then go around it all the way down. So I've done about 11 repeats, I think 11 or 12. It's about 1.5 centimetres of that big weave, a little bit more. And then what we're going to do now, we're going to pull the bottom 2 wires down and the top 2 wires up. We're just going to work across those middle 4 wires. And we're going to do the same weave, but just over the 4 wires. So to get into place, I'm going over the bottom 2 and up between them, over the next 2 and in between them. And that's got me in place now to work across those 4 wires. So the same weave we did before, around the bottom 2, up between them, around the middle 2, up between them, over the top, and then up between those 2 wires and around the top wire. Coming down, we just go around the single wires, so we just go in between the middle 2 and around that 3rd wire, come up between the bottom 2, go around the 2nd wire, and then bring the wire underneath and go around that bottom wire. So we'll keep repeating that now, just going across the 4 wires. Remember to keep pushing your weave together as you go. So I've done about 12 repeats of that weave, and that's about 1 centimetre, thereabouts. So what we're going to do now is take your bail pliers and we're going to bend it forward over the bail pliers. So I'm using the smaller size, so I've got the smaller size to the front and I'm gripping it just at the top of the big weave. So I've got a bit of big weave at the top there. And we're going to bend the whole thing over the pliers, including the bare wires as well. And then as it comes to, what we want to do is, we want to take these 4 wires, I'm going to bend them a bit, because I'm going to post them through where the top of the bead is, through the gap there to the back. And I want it to meet so that the weave comes to the top there where the gap is. So I'm going to twist the pliers a little bit so that that weave reaches to the bottom there. I'm going to bend the big weave back a little at the bottom to give it a bit of shape. And I don't want these wires to cross over each other. I'll have the 2 going one way and the 2 going the other. So fiddly to do this so close. So the idea is that we've got a nice bail and the weave comes down and the wires go through the middle. the bottom of the weave. So I'm going to fiddle with that to get the shaping right. So the weave goes over, and I've pushed it back a little bit there. And these two bare wires come over as well. And then it goes through the top. Two wires go to one side and two go to the other. You're going to make sure that your wires don't cross over each other. And I'm going to straighten my wires a bit. And I forgot, but we needed to finish off that weave with 3 wraps around the single wire. So I'll write it on the video, but you do need to finish off that weave really. So then we need to cut that weaving wire. To reposition your bail pliers or whatever it is that you're using, you just need to shape these bare wires. I want them to come over as the weave did, but I also want them to scoop out. And to meet at the bottom there. And then where they meet at the bottom, I'm going to bend them back out. Try not to let them cross over. So taking your weaving wire, focusing on these 4 bare wires, I'm going to attach to the second one with 3 wraps. Slide that up into place. So it's right at the base of the weave where all these 4 wires meet. We're going to come underneath the bottom wire, go around the 2 wires once, come up between the 2, and then we'll go over the 3rd wire. So we're pulling these wires together, securing them together. Then we'll go around the second wire, around the 2 wires just once, and then around that wire. I'm calling it the second wire, it's the 3rd wire, isn't it? So then we'll go over the second wire, definitely the second wire this time. So we're going to round the second wire, around the bottom 2, then around that second wire again. So I'm just tying all 4 wires together now. Now I want to put my bead on this weaving wire, so I'm going to cut a little bit of wire off. To cut the bobbin free. And then you need to find that little bead from earlier, the 4mm one. You can use a similar size bead if you want to. I'm going to push my weave down a bit so my bead sits properly. And then we just wrap it around the other wire. To finish it off, we go around the bottom wire, around the two, around the bottom wire. Finish with a few wraps around, I'm calling it the bottom wire again. And I'll cut that wire, the weaving wire that is. I hope I'm not confusing you too much, saying all my words wrong. Cut the other weaving wire as well. Try and get it as even as you can. So now we're going to focus on these side wires. I've straightened them again because I bent them all again earlier. I'm holding them together and bending them together at the same time. Bring them to the front. Straight over the front. And I'm going to scoop them up like that. Do the same with the other ones. Bend them to the front. Straight over. Bend those up as well. I was squeezing them at the bottom there to press them into the bottom of the pendant to kind of secure it all down a little bit. So I'm going to hold it here, I'm just going to separate the wires. So now you need your weaving wire. I'm going to weave now across all 4 of these bare wires. I'm going to start with the second one again. I'm going to wrap 3 times around that wire to attach to it. Slide it down into place. I want it just at the bottom where all the wires meet. I hope you can see this, the lighting's awful today. So I've come under the bottom wire, so I wrap around those bottom 2, come up between the bottom 2 wires and wrap around the second wire. Go over the 3rd wire and around the 3rd wire. Then go around the top 2 wires and then around that 3rd wire again. Over the 2nd wire and around the 2nd wire. Go around the bottom 2 and then around the 2nd wire. Just pinning them together with the same kind of weave that we did here at the bottom. So now I'm just going to weave over these 2. And before I do, I'm just going to shape them a little bit so that this wire comes down more and this one goes up a little bit, so I've got a nice gap in between them. and I'm going to do a figure 8 weave across these 2 wires. So I'm going to come straight over the bottom wire. I'm going to wrap 3 times. And I'm going to go over the top wire, which is the 2nd wire. I'm going to wrap 3 times. Over the bottom wire and wrap 3 times. Over the top wire. You have to keep pushing it together as you go. And wrap 3 times. So we're going to keep repeating that, and you don't want your wires to come together. And we're just going to go enough to go just to go over the edge of that weave there, so we haven't got to do many more repeats. Repeated that weave a few more times so it just reaches over the side there. And cut that weaving wire. Cut that one from the beginning too. Give it a pull first. Make sure the wire is nice and tight. So we really need to match these weaves up, because we're going to do the same on the other side as well. So before I start bending weaves, I think we'll weave the other side and then we can match them all up before we start spoiling it too much. So take your weaving wire and we're going to work across these 2 wires. We'll do what we did here. So wrap 3 times around one of the wires and then go over the opposite one and wrap 3 times. Over the opposite wire, wrap 3 times. Keep pushing your weaves together as you go. Don't let these 2 base wires come together as you're working. And we'll try and get the same weave on that side, and we'll try and match up the shaping of the wires too. So I've done the same weave on the other side. I'm going to cut that weaving wire. I'm going to cut that weaving wire too. When you're happy with the shape of those weaves, holding it at the front there so it doesn't misshape it too much, we're going to take these 2 wires, we're going to bend them around, and they're going to go around these 2 bare wires to secure that weave there. And pull these 2 down a little bit out the way. So you don't want to misshape your weave. These wires need to go around those bare wires there. It is a bit fiddly, so I think if we do it slowly, going a bit at a time, and just carefully ease those wires around, keep making sure that the weave is still pushed together. like that. And we want to do that for the other side too. So I've done the same on the other side there. I pulled them around. And then what I'm going to do is cut the wires, leaving long enough for me to wrap it around to finish it off. So I want it quite short really. Do that for this side as well. You don't want it too long and you don't want it too short. And then I'm just going to finish those wires by wrapping them around those bare wires. And then squeeze them into place, and that'll hold the weave together. Finish it off nice. So that's that. I've finished off those wires at the top. So now looking at these 4 bare wires here, I've pulled them out a little and straightened them, and now holding them there, I'm going to bend them both in, and I want this one to finish above the stone and this one to finish below. So I just want to shape it around. Got that shape. And then take your weaving wire and we're going to do this figure of 8 weave across these 2 wires here. So we'll start with 3 wraps around, because I've already got those wraps there. I'm going to start with 3 wraps around the top wire, and I'm just working across those 2. So I'll go 3 wraps around that top wire. So it's 3 wraps over the opposite wire and then 3 wraps. Slide that down into place. And come up between the 2, because I'm going to go over this wire. I'm going to go around it 3 times. This one's ended up being a lot more fiddly than I first thought. Then you go over the opposite wire and 3 times around that wire. And keep pushing those weaves together, wraps together. You go over the opposite wire and you keep doing that. Try not to pull the wires together as you work. So you want this figure of 8 weave to come like this one did across open wires and to finish in line with that weave there. To get around this angle here, because we've only got a little bit of wire here left, but we've got quite a lot of wire here to cover, what I'm going to do is go over, when I go over the outer wire, I'm going to wrap around about 5 times. And then when I come over the inner wire, I'm just going to wrap around once. And then I'll go around that outer wire again and go 5 times. Just so you're covering more of the one wire than the other to get you around that bend, that angle. I've lost count now. And then I'll come around here and just wrap once. I'm nearly there. Just a little bit further. Like that. I'm going to cut the weaving wire, leave myself a little bit of length just to tie this off properly. So that weaves how I want it to be. I'm going to take this wire through between the bead and the weave, and pull it tight, so I'm pulling that wire down, and then I'm going to go around the weave and back under that wire, and then wrap around it to hold it in place. We need to cut all the weaving wire. So now I need to do the same for the other ones. Now these wires I'm going to get in the way, and I do want them quite short, so I'm going to cut them now. And this one. I'm going to do the same with the other wire. A lot of weaving on this one today. So we're going to take these two wires. So now you need to match up this side. There's a lot of matching up on this one, which I know a lot of you don't like. So we're going to bend these wires around. And we're just going to do what we did here. So we're going to bend them around, but we want the one to come around and to sit above. Oops, I thought you could see me then, sorry. Above the bead. And try and match the shape on that side. And then this one needs to go around to sit below the bead, so you've got that nice gap in the middle. Try and match them up the best you can. And then we're going to do that figure of 8 weave that we did earlier. So 3 wraps around, I've gone around the bottom wire, working across these 2 now. Slide it into place. You want the weave to start at the same place as this weave started. Starts there. So you want it to start about there. I always try and use the tail end to hold the weave in place. So then 3 wraps over the opposite wire, and then come back and 3 wraps over this side, and then as you get in around towards the end, we're going to do 5 wraps on the outer wire to just 1 on the inner to get that fan effect at the end. So I'll finish that weave, attach it at the bottom like we did with the other one, going around the actual back weave. Finished it off with wraps around the single wire, cut the base wires, trying to get them all to match the other side. It's not perfect. So now I'm going to curl those wires. I think this one is a little bit longer. And I am going to cut a bit more off these. So with round nose pliers, trying not to mark my bead with my pliers. Just going to curl that wire into a tight little curl. Do the same with the opposite one. Grab the end and bend it around. Try and match them up best you can. And then I'll do the bottom ones. So one way and one the other. Tight little curls. I always try and close the curls so that they don't snag on anything. I do find that my curls that go to the right are always tidier than the ones that go to the left for some reason. So it's a bit of a crazy weaving one for you today. I need to go around it, make sure all those sharp ends are all pressed down. And I'm going to oxidise it because that'll bring out all the detail of the weaves. I think it needs another little bead there. I'm going to have a look and see if I can add another little bead there. Yes, I like that bead there. So what I've done is I've got a small length of weaving wire and I've posted a 3mm bead onto it, and then I've pushed those wires just underneath, so they've kind of followed those bare wires underneath there to the back there. Pull that in place, and then you need to secure those wires. You can either wrap them around a wire at the back, or you can wrap them around the bottom of those bare wires, which is probably what I'll do. So I've secured it by making a little gap between those wires and then wrapping the weaving wire just around the single wire. I thought that might hold it a bit better, because if you wrap around the 2 wires it could come undone. wrapped around the single wire. And there we have it finished. I've had trouble balancing my my camera today, so I'm sorry if it kept going out of focus, or I did throw it across the room a couple of times, but I shall have it all sorted for next time. Hope you found this tutorial not too difficult to follow. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I'm going to oxidise it, so I will show you the oxidised finished piece. So here's a similar one that I made earlier. And I think every piece I make ends up slightly differently if I was to do it again, it would come out differently. But when you oxidise, it really does bring out all the dark tones of the weaves. I love how it stays all dark, as opposed to being all super shiny. I do love that oxidised look. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.